it feels counterintuitive, but it is the meaningful interaction with your friends that you don't want to take off the list. This is where, if you're doing it right and you're very intentional, you actually fill up your energy coffers.
Erin Falconer is the author of How to Get Shit Done and now How to Break Up with Your Friends. She's a digital entrepreneur, the editor-in-chief and co-owner of Pick the Brain, one of the most trusted self-improvement communities online. She was named one of the top digital entrepreneurs in LA. Damn. By LA Confidential, and she's one of the top 7 women changing the digital landscape for good by Refinery 29. She's a friend, incredibly inspiring woman. Heal Squad, welcome Erin Falconer. Hi.
Hi.
I'm so excited that we get to talk in person finally.
I know. This is so nice.
So, how to break up with a friend. How do you go from how to get shit done to how to break up with a friend?
Well, you know what? It's funny because as I was looking to do the follow-up of How to Get Shit Done, which is, very rooted in female productivity and exploring that landscape, I was going in a bunch of different directions and kind of spinning my wheels. I kind of got into an idea or two and I was like, oh, this is it. Nothing was really sticking. And then, 5 months after starting, I woke up at like 6 a.m, kind of half awake, half asleep. And this statement or question or whatever, how to break up with your friends, just kind of was in my mind. And I was like, what's that all about? Couldn't stop thinking about it all day long. It kind of kept coming back to me. And, a couple of days later, this thing is still in my head. I'm like, what is this? It won't leave me alone. And as I started to reflect then on my own friendships and where I was in, my life with my own friendships, I started to think about how much energy I was spending on, being irritated or less than fulfilled and kind of just like bothered by certain people, but not really knowing why and not really doing anything about it. And then when I looked at other friendships that I was really drawn to and still very invested in, I was like, wow, they give me so much energy. And yet these other relationships I feel like are taking so much energy. So when I got right down to it, I was like, actually, even though it doesn't feel linear, I think there's a direct connection between taking stock and being intentional and active in your friendships. And if you're not, if they're not giving you energy, they're taking energy. And so I think there's a through line to productivity. Although it's not obvious, it's really meaningful.
Well, what I loved about the book is you also have a lot of science behind everything. Yeah. And I think you also talked about, I'm trying to get back to the connection between how to get shit done. But, you were talking about in your early days when you were doing Leaf TV and you were so busy, the first thing you would cancel was your friends.
Right.
You would cancel on your friends or you would pray they would cancel on you. And I was like highlighting that part of the book. I'm like, that was me. Right. I would be so excited when people canceled on me.
Yes. I don't have to be the bad guy here.
It was the first time I heard anybody else say that.
Right.
I felt like such a shit for thinking like that sometimes. But, when you're so overwhelmed and overstretched, you think of what's absolutely necessary.
Right. Yeah. And so I think that that's like where I had a bit of a pivot into the second book. Is like my go-to is like, I'm busy, I'm overwhelmed, I'm stressed, get the drinks with friends or the coffee with friends off the calendar. I need to free up time to do stuff that's more important. And then as I reflected upon it, I was like, it feels counterintuitive, but it is the meaningful interaction with your friends that you don't want to take off the list. This is where, if you're doing it right and you're very intentional, you actually fill up your energy coffers. And so you can take a little bit of the day's stress off you. Again, if you're with that person undistracted and really connecting with them, I think it's absolutely foundational to productivity and reducing burnout and generally being a happier person, right? And so the inclination to say, oh, that's just lightweight fun, it's only lightweight fun if that's where you're categorizing it. If you say, this is actually meaningful and I need to connect with somebody outside of work or outside of my romantic relationship to really rejuvenate myself, I think that's the lens you want to be looking at friendship through, right? And the thing is, the book is called How to Break Up with Your Friends, but there's actually, as you know, only one chapter on how to break up with your friends. There are 9 chapters on why meaningful friendship is super important now more than ever. And there's a lot of science about, how it affects your physiology, your mental health, and then also just your quality of life. And so I think we've been dialing these friendships in for so long, we need to take a real critical look at just how we can do them better. And if the angle needs to be because it'll make you more productive, because people are so obsessed with productivity, then that's the angle that we're going to use to get in there to open this conversation up.
I love that. Yeah. I and you quoted me in the book, and I stand by everything. Is anytime I was super sad, I realized Kevin would say, you just haven't seen your friends. Go see your friends.
Totally.
And he would point me in the direction of friends that he knew would fill my cup because they would see me.
Right.
And that was another thing you mentioned, is a lot of the loneliness comes from a lack of friendships where you're seen.
Right. Exactly. Because you're either meeting up with people because it's a legacy friendship, or out of obligation because you've been invited, or you think you should meet up with them. But when you're active and intentional and making real choices around, I need or I want to see this person because this relationship fills me up, and and vice versa, right? You have to be an active participant also in contributing energy to the friendship. But a lot of times, like if we do things out of obligation, like, I got invited to my friend's baby shower or something like that, or my friend's child's birthday, right? And it's like, I got invited, so I should go. You're actually throwing away energy if that's not somewhere where you really feel like you can contribute or you've got the bandwidth for. If it's more important to say, I'd like to carve out, 30 minutes or an hour to really sit down and have a tea with this person or a coffee and connect, as opposed to be running around a kid's birthday party. Like, let's say I don't have kids and nobody really cares.
You're just another body at the party.
Right. And you're just right. Exactly. So you also have to look at like the obligation element and say, and that also goes back to the how to get shit done, is like, just because you're invited doesn't mean you need to go. And so you have to be intentional and say, I really want to see you, but this time is not time well spent between the two of us. What can we do that is time well spent? And then you navigate what that is for the both of you. But you can't do that without analyzing it and then communicating it, right? And we're doing so much stuff just like, oh, good, I got invited. Let me add that to my calendar. Now, on a Saturday when you really should probably be sleeping in or going to the gym or whatever, something really good, you're standing at a 3-year-old's birthday party going, oh, what am I doing here?
Yeah. Or the baby shower where you have to watch a million gifts opened.
Like this.
Can we please end that tradition? It is insane.
And embarrassing.
It's the worst.
It's so embarrassing. I love it.
Oh my God. And then it's like, it's so awkward for people who are like, are they going to like my gift? And then gift comparisons and all. It is like pulling my eyelids off my eyes.
Right.
I just can't. Stab me with a fork in them. Like I agree. You couldn't ask me to do anything worse. I hate it.
Right.
And I know someone's probably listening like, anything worse, but it's true. I really dislike it. I just do. Right. I would never it was like the wedding stuff. Like I always tell people, if we were going to have a wedding, I was going to make it a party where people could come in their flip-flops and just not have to do the whole buy a new outfit, make it all the invitations and the table settings and the seat charts. Like when I did our wedding in Greece, it was like open seating. Here's a bar. Here's some music and some food. Let's keep it chill. Let's keep it easy.
Because that's what it's about.
Yeah.
It's not about that stuff. It's about...
I mean, there were people from the village that were in their jeans. There were people that were dressed up. I was like, whatever, come as you like, no big deal. But yeah, I want to share some of the science actually behind some of this, because I always think it's the hardest thing when you're promoting a book to remember. So I didn't want to put you in that position. But a large-scale Swedish study found that people with fewest social connections were at a 50% increased risk of dying of cardiovascular disease. Crazy. And should you get heart disease, friends help you recover. In a study of the Journal of the American Heart Association, patients with solid social support had better outcomes as well as fewer symptoms of depression. Let's see. There's me smashing the page when you talked about canceling on friends. Dean Ornish, who studied the habits of people living in blue zones, geographical areas in which people have the lowest levels of chronic disease and live longer than anywhere else in the world, like Greece. The time we spend with loved ones is the single most important determinant in how long and how well we live. I thought that was a really, really great statistic.
They're saying now, and it's Vivek Murthy, who is, I think, he was Obama's Surgeon General, and I think he also now might be Biden's. He's written a lot about blue zones and just the importance of social connection. And he predicted that soon doctors will recommend socialization and ask you about your socialization patterns, just as they ask you if you smoke cigarettes or drink alcohol. Like, it'll factor in at that level. Like, and where do you fit in socially? Like, are you seeing people? How often? Just like how many cigarettes do you smoke a day or how many drinks do you have a week?
Yeah.
How often do you socialize in a meaningful way with people? Because that's how directly it impacts your health.
I know. I experienced it. You experienced it,
totally,
right?
Absolutely.
I mean, when you didn't get to see your friends, how did you feel?
Well, this is the funny thing. So I went down that rabbit hole. I started, putting the pitch together for the book. I went out and I sold this title February 23rd, which is 3 weeks before the pandemic started. I thought this topic was important then. I could not have predicted what was literally just around the corner. And as everybody knows, unfortunately, we went into quarantine and all of those friendships were immediately kind of ripped out of our lives. We had our immediate family only, and that was it, basically, right? And so I remember in those early days, there was like, when we realized, okay, this isn't like going to be a 3-day thing. This feels like it might be terrible and be like a month.
Yeah. Hilarious.
Anyways, when we realized that this was kind of around to stay, I got this like kind of onslaught, and I'm sure you guys did too, with these Zoom happy hours. Like,
I never got invited to a Zoom happy hour. Isn't that funny?
All my friends were like, different groups were like, we've got to connect on Zoom and da-da-da. And I had such a visceral reaction where I was like, oh my God, yes, to some people. And then to some of them, I was like, oh no, like, I don't, there's so much going on mentally. Like, I just don't feel like I need to connect with this person. And that was like a big, light bulb moment that just continued. And so this book also, like How to Get Shit Done, a large part of it is experimental, and it's experimental. I was like literally, as I'm writing this thing, doing experiments on my own, on what was going on in my own life and how I was reacting. And so, I mean, a lot of it is, informational. And then there's a real experiential part of it as I was writing it, because real time going through that pandemic, it was like crazy.
Yeah. It's so wild to know that you got that download.
Yeah.
And it was obvious that you were the one chosen to do this at that time because it was important.
Right.
Cool.
I talk a lot about it in the first book about, I think I say it like it's incumbent upon everybody to find their hot shower. And what I mean by that is, how often have you met up with a friend or been with a colleague and somebody comes in with a really good idea and they're like, oh my God, I had this amazing idea. And they tell you and go, oh, like, that's great. How did you think of that? And they're like, I don't know. I was just in the shower this morning and it hit to me. It came to me. And I was like, that's absolutely not a coincidence, because this is often the only time most people have that 2 minutes or 3 minutes when they're alone, warm water's hitting their face, they're massaging their head, they're not really thinking about anything. And what happens? Boom, an idea, and your internal voice comes up. And so whether that's meditation or baths or taking long walks, device free, you have to be able to find 15 to 20 minutes a day, every single day, to reduce the chaos, to allow the answers to come from within, and then start to recognize them when they do. And so when this idea came up, how to break up with your friends, and I was in that, not asleep, not thinking of anything again, boom, this idea comes up. And it just wouldn't leave me. But if you have a lot of chaos in your life and you are not living intentionally, you're going to miss those signs and signals all day long, every day. And they're there for everybody. I don't care who you are. So find your hot shower and make it happen every day.
I love that. Find your hot shower. I was doing that with my mom, where I would get those downloads on what to do next with her.
Right.
I was like, God, what do I do next? I'm scared. And then the download would
Yeah.
come
Mm-hmm.
and I would go in that direction
Yeah.
and it would work. And I was like, my God, this is unbelievable. I have like a direct connect. This is crazy, but you have time. It's open.
It's open.
And you hear it.
Prayer. Yeah. Any kind of prayer is also it's a form of meditation, right? It is literally just calm and peace, trying to access something in yourself or, spiritually, however you want to phrase it. But prayer is a great way to just reduce chaos and allow whatever needs to come shine through you, shine. That's the only way to do it. And only you can do it. Nobody can do that for you.
Yep.
So
when you realized that you were getting these happy hours, we'll get to the fact that I didn't get invited to them later.
I'm shocked.
Yeah. I did one drinking Zoom with my best friend Alyssa when my uncle died.
Okay.
That night, we Zoomed together. I was super sad.
Yeah.
And we Zoomed together and we had a glass of wine because he loved wine.
Right.
So I did it for him. But I was like, oh, maybe I should have been doing these. Like the whole Zoom get together.
Oh,
I was so turned off by it because I did Easter like that.
Right.
And when you have a Greek family, we're very loud.
Right.
And you can't hear each other when you're in the room, forget on Zoom. So it was a very frustrating situation. Right. But yeah, very interesting.
Well, that's the thing for me, because I have a visceral reaction, negative reaction to a Zoom happy hour as well. So the fact that I even contemplated it with some people was that's
how much you know.
I was like, okay, I really like this person because I'm contemplating doing this ridiculous thing. And frankly, when I did it, I didn't have a good time, and it's not because of the other people. I was like, this is so weird. I'm sitting in my office. It's dark. I'm hiding from my son. We're drinking. I'm like, oh my God, no, this is so lame. I'm not into it, but it speaks volumes about the way I felt about those people that I was, doing it.
So my question is, you're having this real life experience where you're realizing, oh, I really don't want to Zoom with them.
Right.
So in the process of writing this book, did you break up with friends?
Yeah. I needed to get clear. So that as opposed to just being like, oh, I'm irritated and dropping it, I was like, I'm irritated. Why? What's going on here? Because in theory, this is one of my friends. And so for each friendship that I kind of looked at, some of them were like, oh, there's been this underlying irritation that we just haven't addressed. And it's not in and of itself, it's not that big, but cumulatively, because I haven't addressed it, I've built up resentments. And I talk about one story in the book with a really good friend of mine who otherwise I really adore, and longstanding friend. She lives very far. She lives on the east side. I live on the west side. So, driving is, it's
like going to another state.
It's like going to another state. It's really stressful when you get there for something that's supposed to be fun and you've been stuck in traffic for an hour, blah, blah, blah. And so, but I noticed that she was chronically late. And every time, even when she was coming to visit me, which was super rare, and also I was the one that was mostly driving to see her. She'd always come up with excuses, and I'd be like, oh, okay, I'll drive. And so, but it was just this thing about being late, and she'd arrive every time and have some fantastic story about why she was late. So then we're hanging out for an hour, but the first 20 minutes is I'm having to indulge her listening to this story that I could not possibly care less about.
I hate hearing the late story.
Right. I'm like, but we both live in the same city and somehow anyways. So I realized that over the course of time, she'd invite me to plans, I would just more and more not go. And I don't even think I was clear on why I was not going. I just had this built up subconscious resentment. And so that's an example of a friendship that I didn't break up with. But we ended up having a very, what I would consider stressful conversation where I was like, well, look, I'm writing this book. I'm going to say something. And I was amazing. I watched all
that's next level. That's not even I have to have the conversation with my friend. Now I'm actually going to be writing about this.
Right. Exactly.
Ooh,
so
that was tough.
Yeah. And it's that. So that's in the book, and it was amazing to watch my instincts of even when I knew I was going to sit across from her and tell her this stuff, I was constant. And by the way, she was late to that meeting. And so I was combination of really fuming because of that. And then see, this is why I'm talking about her. And then I'm going to talk, we need to talk about this. And then also talking myself out of it. I'm mad and then talking myself out of it and be like, I don't know, maybe she is going through something stressful. I don't know if I say something, it's going to be really triggering for her. I don't know. Maybe I'm making this a bigger deal than it is. We've been friends for so long.
But don't you think all those conversations are happening with yourself because you just don't want to do it?
Totally.
That's
It's
it,
all
right?
fear-based. I'm just talking myself out of it.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point for us to stress to everyone. The second you're having second thoughts about it and then trying to rationalize their behavior and what's gone on, it's really because you don't want to deal with it or you're scared to deal with it. And so that's why most of us never say anything.
Right.
That's why I like cousin status. Just put them on a cousin status so you don't have to deal with it.
Exactly.
But then at the same time, like you have your distance.
Right. Right. And so I think look, if you have a really long-standing friendship with somebody and they're just frustrating you over and over again, but you don't want to do a huge breakup because maybe they're part of a friend group and you will see them once a year and you don't want it to be awkward. That's fine. But if you think there's real juice in that friendship and beyond the being late, if that's a relationship, intellectually you like hanging out with this person, or she's really funny, or she really provides support in X, Y, and Z way, you don't want to throw that relationship out just because she's late. What you want to do is give that relationship some respect and say, this is really bothering me. I'm now noticing this pattern in my own self, where I'm distancing myself from you. And I want to give this relationship actually a chance, but I'm just telling you my own boundary. I cannot sit here and waste 20 minutes hearing why you're late. It's adding insult to injury that you are late in the first place chronically. And I have really limited bandwidth. So the fact that I'm, driving to you, this is such a pain point for me. And I want to get on the other side of it, but I just needed you to hear, I'm super frustrated about this. And it's a big barrier to getting to the good stuff between us. And then if that person is still perpetually late, it's okay, bye. Cousin status or bye, or bye,
Yeah.
But I think that just also what you're doing is holding a lot of negative energy subconsciously, right? So just being able to I need to offload this. I don't need to carry this right now. It might be scary or you feel it's going to be, oh, what an energy drag. I don't want to deal with this. But actually when you rid yourself of that negative energy, these things that have been building up, it's amazing how light you feel the next day. And it's whoa, something shifted. And that's where you want to be emotionally and also from a productivity standpoint. That's how your wheels can be spinning at full speed and in the direction you want to go. Otherwise, it's frenetic energy that you can't quite get a hold on.
Yeah. I think it kind of goes back to kind of learning how to stand up for yourself, which is something we're not all really good at or we're all trying to get to.
Right.
And I have a friend who is a longstanding friend who's just so fucking difficult. Right. Excuse my language, everybody. Sorry for the F-bomb, but it really, really warranted it if you knew. And and then what's crazy is I'm reading the book, which is friggin' amazing, by the way. Let me find this page. Oh, here we go. Toxic Friends. And I'm reading the description of toxic friends and I go, oh, I would have never categorized this person as toxic. Maybe a nightmare, but toxic. And yet a lot of those boxes get checked.
Right.
And it's a really frustrating thing when someone, I'll say, oh, there's something I want to pursue. It's why? There are a million of those.
Oh, yeah.
Or loves benefiting from me, but then loves putting me down too.
Right. Yeah, I would say that you need to look at that.
And you're but then again, the battle is this person was great to me, horrible to everyone around me. But so it's a struggle. So then you're just okay, I'll just distance.
Right.
But the problem is, as you just said, you still carry it. The weight is still on you if you don't actually say anything. But then now, if I'm in that situation, and I'm saying this because I know someone else is going to feel it, now I try to confront this uber difficult person.
Right.
Do you know how argumentative this person is? Do you know I'm not going to even win?
Okay.
And by the way, it's not about winning. I'm not even going to be able to get a word in.
Right.
It's going to be so challenging. It's going to suck so much more of my energy out. So I'm just
well, here's a question.
Whatever.
Do you want to still be friends with this person? Is this relationship providing value in your life? Because
It's so hard.
Right.
Because there are certain things, yes, but it's just like the bad just really just outweighs the good sometimes.
Right, right. Well, first of all, based on the way that this person is, the way you're describing her. So I'm a big fan of like, if you are going to have a tough conversation or break up with somebody, you want, in a best case scenario, you want to do it either in person or on the phone, like with a voice. But not all friendships are created equal. And if there is going to be, you want to get the information to this person in the way that she can best receive it. And so it sounds like to me, this is an email. And like, no, really, because it's like,
I wouldn't have even thought of that.
Let her sit with these words with nobody. And she might fire off some reactive email back. You don't even need to read that, first of all, for like a week, just let her sit in these words, as opposed to like you taking your time and energy when it's just going to be deflected right back onto you. And the information, your information, even if it makes it to her, which it doesn't sound like that information will even make it to her, it certainly won't be received. And so then what's the point? Right? So like there's a way to put that in an email and say, listen, I just need you to hear this. And then detail out what the problem is. And if you do still want this relationship in your life, say, look, I love you for X, Y, and Z reason, but we need to find a balance between the negative and the positive here, because it's just taking my energy, and I don't, that's not good.
Yeah.
So if we can come to some sort of agreement on like you putting a cap on, poo-pooing me, and maybe, a lot of times people are so up in their like own world, like they don't even realize how they're behaving and perceived out in the world.
Yep. No. Absolutely no self-awareness.
Right. And so like...
But by the way, that's everybody.
Right.
There's so little self-awareness. Right. All you do is watch walking contradictions, or at least I do. Right. Walking contradictions all the time. 90 Day Fiancé recently. I'm watching 90 Day Fiancé, and the girl full on says she has secrets she's keeping from the guy because she's afraid he wouldn't have wanted to be with her.
Right.
One was that she had been married before, and this is a very devout Muslim guy who does not want to marry somebody who's been married before, apparently, whatever. And then the fact that she's adopted and like her family issues and hiding everything from him.
Okay.
He lies about his age by a year and a half, maybe 2 years. She flips out, goes in her room in whatever country they're in, is bawling hysterically. The mother's like, she's really overreacting over this. I just can't believe this person's lying to me. And I've gone through so much in my life, and everyone takes advantage of me, and he won't even tell me truths and this and that. And I'm like, oh my God.
No.
Oh my God. You are literally in one interview talking about how you have kept truths from him. Now, do you want to say keep truths or lied? Whatever words you want to use. Right. And you're hanging the guy for lying to you about his age. What are we talking about?
It's insane.
But then then back to the friends thing. I have another friend who I've distanced myself from who want to talk about late, just cancels every time.
Yeah.
Always excited to schedule the plan. When I say, if I show you the text thread, you guys would actually start crying laughing because you would think, wow, this is so pathetic. Cancel. And then is now actively trying to make plans. I go, why would I ever do that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Have a little self-awearness. Go back and look at your behavior.
I don't just look at the text chain. Yeah, no, totally. And I think that's one of the things, like, again, going back to, what we were talking about at the beginning, where it's like, you have to, I think, to make these relationships really work for you, just like a romantic relationship, you have to commit to it. And that doesn't mean you commit to seeing them every day. Whatever the rhythm is right between the two of you you figure that out, right? And you measure expectations and make sure you're on the same page. But you have to make a commitment. If this person is not committing to this relationship, I got news for you, there's no relationship.
Yep.
And the thing is, all that's doing is providing irritation to you, and also at least subconsciously being like, whoa, like what's going on? Trying to figure out what is going on here, because it's weird. As you said, she's excited to see you, and then like, and by the way, it has nothing to do with you. This is a woman that's got doesn't have a grasp on
probably
what's
does
going
this
on
with everyone in her life, and is wondering why she's probably lonely.
Right.
No plans. I don't know.
The thing about it is, when you look at like the kind of modern therapeutic landscape, there's individual therapy, there's couples therapy, there's family therapy. but there's no therapy for friends, right? And why that matters is that there's no kind of language around conflict. There's no language around conflict resolution. There's no blueprint about how to operate in these friendships because like if this were a romantic, let's say you were dating this person, well, this person's gone. Why? Because consciously and subconsciously, you've got like a blueprint of what is okay and what's not okay, right? And you just be like, bye, peace. Like you're
but we don't have that for friends.
we don't have that. And then we keep like hanging in there. And if you put it in the romantic context, you're like, well, that person's a fool. Why would she keep doing that, right? But here we are with our friends, and it's like,
damn,
we expect these friendships to be these lightweight things that are nice to have, but they're not. And no meaningful relationship is just a nice lightweight thing that you can kind of tap into and tap out of whenever you want. It's certainly a different dynamic than a family member or a romantic partner. And the responsibilities are different. However, any relationship that is worth having takes work, right? How many times have you heard if somebody asks you, what's the key to the success between you and Kevin? Well, it's a lot of work. We're constantly reevaluating who we are and like when problem solving, and maybe we're going to couples counseling and at certain times, and maybe, we go through it and then we work to figure it out. And friendships, while you shouldn't necessarily be like working so hard because there is a different nature, they still require work and you can't, and commitment. And so you can't cancel 25 times in a row on a friendship, on a friend that, as I said, that's not a friendship. That person is not committed to this. And therefore you're in a relationship with a non-committed partner. So, I mean, you know where that's going to end up. You can keep it alive as long as you want, but it's already dead. You can keep it alive in your mind as long as you want, but this thing's dead.
Yeah, you're right. Such a mic drop moment. Well, thank God we have How to Break Up with Your Friends. Erin is our new therapist. The other thing that was really cool, well, there's a lot of cool things in here. This is going to be your new Bible, everybody. There was something Kelsey flipped out about in here, but then also before I get to that, maybe I'll get to this first, then I'll go back to my thought. So you have a part in the book where you talk about realizing you were very good friends with someone you weren't very good friends with at all anymore.
Right.
Kelsey, tell us what your connection to that was.
I just feel like so much of us do that. What was the word you used, Erin? Like
a legacy
friendship? Legacy friend, yeah. Exactly. I was going to say history, but I like legacy better. It's these people that, maybe you grew up with, or your parents are friends with their parents, or, whatever it is. And it's like, I don't know, that really hit for me. I think we all have those people in our lives that you feel badly not maintaining the friendship, but you have nothing in common anymore. And you're like, you used to call each other best friends, so maybe you still do. And then you're like, wait, we're not best friends at all. Right. So it's like, I think for me, what was kind of like, oh my God, is like, what do you do with those people, right? Because you don't want to, you don't want to completely, there's history.
Do I put them on a shelf somewhere? Right. Where do I go? Where do they go?
Right. I'm like, I don't want to necessarily make them cousin status because there's history. Anyways. If you could speak to that, that'd be great.
Yeah. Well, so
Kelsey, I love you. That's hilarious. Where do I put them?
What do I do?
Well, yeah, I think the thing is like, as a person, hopefully you are constantly evolving, right? And if you're really doing it right, you are paying attention to where you're evolving and how you're changing and where you're pivoting. Life is it's never linear, right? So paying attention to like all of the zigzags you're doing throughout a life is crazy, right? You're going to end up, even the core of who you are may stay the same, but where you are spiritually, intellectually, energetically is going to be shifting constantly. And so by nature, some of the people that you've had in your life for 20 years, some of them are going to grow and evolve with you, and that relationship becomes more dynamic. And some of them naturally will have different pivot points and start going in different directions, not necessarily worse, but different, right? And so you end up on a different page than that person is. Where you're going to get into trouble, right, and where I think you have to do something about it, is if there is a different understanding or expectation from that other person. So if that other person is with any frequency trying to hang out with you or engage with you, and you're just not feeling it, then you've got a problem. You got something you have to deal with. If that person is not really in your life and they are just, I guess, a friend on Facebook, and they show up in your feed like once a year for their birthday, there's not really something that you need to do about that. But if there is a situation where that person's like trying to hang out with you or trying to engage with you in any sort of meaningful way, then you're going to have to decide where you're going to put that person and then communicate that to them, because that's when you're using up energy subconsciously without even realizing it. You're getting frustrated. You're like, oh my God, I don't want to see this person. I'm canceling on them every time. Or even if they're like texting you, well, you got to respond. That takes energy, right? And so you got to learn that everything you do, if you're doing it in automatic pilot, it's not a choice. And choice is where you get power and energy from. So if this person is trying to engage with you, you need to make a choice. Where am I going to put this person, and how am I going to communicate it? And am I going to communicate it directly, or am I going to communicate it through respectful action? And that you need to...
respectful action. What's that?
I mean, just managing expectations. Like, for example, in the first book, I think we might have even talked about this in our first interview. A good friend of mine called me complaining about another friend of ours. And she said, I'm so frustrated. I've just had it with this person. She calls me every single day, like without fail, at like 11 o'clock. And this other friend of ours was like an actress and didn't have like a 9-to-5 schedule kind of thing. My friend and I were both like in an office working. And my friend was so frustrated. She's like, she just doesn't get it. Like, she's at home watching TV all day. And so she just feels like she can call me at 11 and da-da-da. And I said to my friend, well, do you answer? And she's like, yeah. I mean, yeah. And I'm like, I act bothered and da-da-da. And she keeps calling. I go, she keeps calling because you keep answering. Stop answering at 11 o'clock. Only take her calls if she calls at 6 or after, or whatever works for you, or on the weekend.
Wait, that's like when you talk about in here, you're the co-creator.
You're the co-creator. Yeah. You teach people how to treat you, and you teach these relationships how to treat you. And so that's a good example of like, if somebody's calling you at 11 in the middle of a workday, don't pick up, because that is a nonverbal signal. It doesn't matter if you're giving them attitude when you answer. It's like, we're animals, right? It's Pavlovian. I call, you answer. I call, you answer. That's the only habit that they're remembering. They're not remembering your attitude, right? Obviously not. They're calling you the next day at 11 o'clock. Why? I call, you answer. So start changing the behavior. And I'm not talking about ghosting. I'm saying find a rhythm that is right for you and communicate that by your action. This person's going to get it if you only pick up the phone once a month. She'll start calling you once a month, right? It's not going to be overnight, but that's what's going to happen. And if that rhythm is right for you, cool. If it's not, and it's like you never want to speak to this person ever again, not that you have hard feelings, then that's maybe something you need to communicate in a nice way, as opposed to like, you're never going to get that, then you're ghosting the person, basically, right?
Yeah, you're the co-creator. And you, I think you said, it's almost like it becomes your fault as well.
Right. You have a response. What I hear all the time is, this person's toxic. She's toxic. He's toxic. Da, 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 da. And I need to be clear that most times the other person is not necessarily toxic. It is the relationship between you that is toxic. And there might be an instigator, right? Like in your case with your friend that you were just talking about, she is clearly the instigator. But your acceptance of her behavior, your act of choice to keep engaging, is what fuels it.
Yep.
And that person might be out in the world and having other relationships that are different, like that do work, right? But so it's the relationship that is the problem, not the other person, in the sense that you are co-creating what is happening here, either by being, the aggressor, or allowing the aggressor to keep giving them oxygen in this relationship. And so when you understand your responsibility, then you understand your personal power, right? And again, that's what we want to be doing. So it's great teachable moments, even when these relationships need to end. And I talk about a personal story that I had in the book where I would have, and I did for years, even after I ended this friendship, talked about this person as a toxic person. And while I do think she was certainly unbalanced in certain ways, I really looked, she was the type of person, I don't know if you guys like know anybody like this, that she's always has drama in her life. Like she's either getting fired or her boyfriend's kicked her out, or like she needs to take her dog to like get $5,000 surgery and she doesn't have any money. You know, like one of those people that just, it feels like they can't quite ever get it together. And so I was like her person to call, right? And it was so exhausting for me. And it just kept escalating. You know, I would jump in and like save the day. And I ultimately had to end that friendship. And I talk about that in the book. But what I realized all these years later was like, what? So I just dismissed this. Like, this is a crazy person. She's a toxic person, right? The thing is, that was a missed opportunity, because if I really looked at it, and I did all these years later, what was my role in this? Why did I need to be in this? Why did I need to have this hero complex, despite it taking all my energy, right? And I'd wake up the next day after like some crazy thing that I needed to like bail her out of, and I'd be like exhausted, and I'd text her and I'd be like, "You okay?" And she'd be like, "What? Yeah, I'm just having coffee. Like, what's up?" And I'm like, "What? What?" Like literally it was like a 5-alarm fire that I was like all night, like, oh my God, I can't believe it. And she's just like, yeah, no, cool. What's up? You know? And I'm just
it's like a vampire.
It's like a vampire, right? And so what in me though needed to be in this? What part of my ego or self-esteem was this fueling?
What significance were you getting from that hero moment?
That's right. That's super good information to have if you want to be working on yourself, right? And try and minimize like leaning into those parts of myself that needs that kind of gratification, because it's a lose-lose, you know? I actually, in the end, got nothing out of it except a headache and then like a super awkward, you know, dramatic ending with this person, when none of that needs, like, I don't want to repeat that. The thing is, if you don't learn from it, you're apt to repeat these things. So, yeah.
Such good perspective. Yeah, I think when you talk about auditing friendships, it's really important because how you feel when you're around the person is so important to kind of identify if this is toxic or what kind of friendship it is. Like I'm thinking, you know, there are friends that I feel like I can totally be me and shine.
Yeah.
And then there are friends that I'm muted and very like in my turtle shell and then there are friends who I want to have a conversation and their heads are on swivels.
Totally.
Who's coming in, who's around, and it's like, wait, are we friends? I don't even understand.
Yeah.
Because if we're friends, like we should like maybe want to have a conversation.
Yeah. It's so funny because
I feel like that's a very LA thing though. I don't know if other people's heads are on swivels, but
no, they are.
It could be everywhere because
no, they are.
If you're with your girlfriends and they're looking for guys, then their heads are on swivels, not paying attention to you. Maybe it's like
no, and it's just also like everybody always has a device like sewn into their hand, even if I'm talking to you, and it's like they might not be looking at who's coming in, but they're looking, oh, what's she posting? What's she posting? And it's like they're distracted and they're not. Yeah. They're not, you know, sharing their full energy with you. And the auditing part of this is so, I think, important because we culturally are, and I think I talked to Kelsey about this, we are like obsessed with understanding every single calorie we put in our mouth. We're wearing watches that tell us every single step we take. Like we need to have this information. We're like obsessed with Marie Kondo, who's like looking at ways to declutter and take every, you know, really
and make everything look perfect.
And be intentional about our spaces. And yet people, nothing.
Yeah.
Right? Just like dialing it in. Super missed opportunity. And I think like the antidote for chaos is creating meaning in these relationships and being intentional in these relationships. And without reducing chaos, either finding your hot shower and creating meaning in your life, burnout, frustration, anxiety rising, depression rising, it's just not sustainable. And it's certainly not sustainable if you want like a happy, fulfilled life. Yeah. And I don't even think physiologically it's sustainable. Like stress levels are just.
And if you think about everything you're saying in the book with all the science-backed information too, if friendships are that vital to our health, emotionally and mentally and physically and spiritually, everything, and we have friends that are not contributing to the friendship or being toxic or negative or any of that, then that's actually going to be
detrimental,
hurting your health.
That's exactly it.
We really do need to look at this in such a big way. just like we're going to the doctor for our annual physical
Right.
and everything else, because this is a daily stressor in your life.
Right. If it's not, I say all the time, if something's not giving you energy, it's taking. There is no net neutral. And so I think with relationships, which are so activating, right, both bad and good, if something is not providing you value, it is taking value. And so there is no kind of like, all these things are floating here. You've got to start being intentional and making choices. And that's how we're going to start, again, like making meaning and combating chaos and slowing things down a little bit, like so our brains can process and be, and recover, actually coming 2 years out of a pandemic, go into a bit of a recovery mode here, because this is just the stress levels have been bananas.
Yeah. It's funny. One of the things I think I told you is when I started going on vacation with my best friend.
Right.
We used to fly together growing up because she worked for the airlines. Her mom worked for the airlines. And then at some point I realized I am working like a crazy person. Kelsey, just so you know, like vacation, that was like my second year at Extra, I think. That's how many years into my career. Anyway, I said, Alyssa, we like never travel together. I have that 3-day window, like right after Christmas, before New Year's. Let's just like go to Mexico.
Yeah.
And she would be on her phone the whole time. And I would get so angry and so frustrated. Now, Alyssa is a friend that I know I can have a conversation with.
Right.
And it's not going to be this like explosive, crazy, whatever.
Right.
So I said, hey, like, are your friends, are you even interested in being here with me currently? Or are you more excited to be with the people back in Boston that are freezing their asses off right now? Because it really looks like you really just want to be with them.
Yeah.
And she kind of like, I don't know if she knew how to handle it, but at some point on the next vacation, I said, listen, if we're going to go on vacation, phones are gone.
Right.
Like this is our time to hang out and to see each other.
Yeah.
Because the thing is, for me, most of my friends live outside of LA.
Yeah.
They live in other states.
Right.
So when I do have time with you, I really want to like deep dive and be with you.
Exactly.
And so I cut the devices. I said, we only use our devices at night when we go back to our rooms.
Right.
We check in at home, whatever. The rest of the time is about us. And it was the best thing ever.
Yeah.
So if for you, anybody who's listening out there, Heal Squad, if you have friends that are doing this, oh my God, Meredith and I have had blowouts about this. Every year we go to the Super Bowl. Since pandemic, obviously not. And she'd be on her phone the whole time.
Yeah.
And I'm like, Meredith, we see each other once a year. Could you actually lay off the freaking phone? And I would get more mad and more mad and more mad. And she's like, Maria, stop it. She gets so like, whatever. And I just like, I literally would like flip out. And I was like, that's it. I'm just like, I can't take this anymore. But with Alyssa, we were able to change that dynamic and it helps. So for anybody who's listening out there, maybe it's not a vacation thing. Maybe it's at dinner.
Totally.
And they can't,
Put the phone down.
Either leave the device in the glove compartment of your car or have it there in case of an emergency. Fine. We're all so obsessed with emergencies.
Yeah. What did we do 15 years ago? Or
Exactly.
I don't know whatever happened. It's amazing we survived as a species because everybody is always like, but what if I get the call? I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah.
What call? You're kind of manifesting something negative to happen right now.
Exactly. So if I'm at dinner and my phone isn't in the glove compartment or in my purse, I have it face down.
Yeah, face down. That's just etiquette.
That's it.
Etiquette and not in your hand.
Again, the question is, do you want to be at this dinner or do you want to be on the phone with everyone who's not at the friggin' dinner?
Yeah. Watching other people live their lives instead of living your life now.
I don't understand. It really upsets me. Yeah. So I want to get into the friendship diagnosis because I really, really love this part. So obviously there is, how do you feel? How do you behave? Which I thought was really, really important. Right?
Yeah.
And what role does everyone play? Let's talk a little bit about that. And then I want to go into the different kind of friends and what that all is meant to do.
Yeah. Yeah. So it often when we look at friends, different friends in our lives, we're looking at like how they behave or what, kind of they bring to the table. And I think that one of the most important things is it's always about kind of going back internally and say, okay, but how do I show up in friendship? What role do I play? How am I contributing and participating? And that answer will be different, like with different friends, there'll still be a core though of you that shows up in all of these relationships. But it's good information to have, because when I started, writing all these things down, I realized that I really show up, or what people are coming to me for, I guess more is like the role of like the fixer. Like if there's a problem or a life crisis, or that somebody's got a big job interview tomorrow and they want to like that's like my friends, like that's when I hear from the most, right? And I love that role, and I feel good about, being in that role. But when I really looked at it, I was like, I'm one of my shortcomings then I noticed about myself is that I really never show up with vulnerability. Like I never then, when I have a problem, I try to work it out like myself. And
well, because if you show vulnerability,
right.
then they're going to think you're not the one to go to.
I'm going to ruin my cred, my friendship cred, right? And the thing is, that's just not true. You can lead with that personality trait, but if you really want a full, complete relationship with friendship, the vulnerability part is key, and you don't need to lead with that. And I don't need to be calling all my friends crying at times. But when there is something that really is meaningful, or I'm scared, or I don't have the answers, it's really nice to be able to, for that relationship, to be able to lean on people in a way that you wouldn't conventionally. I think one of the things that I think are the most kind of impactful about friendship, and we talked about this a little earlier, is this idea that you co-create who you are. Friendships, not only do you mold a friendship molds you, and it brings out parts of yourself that otherwise would not be discovered. And so I think when you limit it to a very narrow like lens, right, you are only discovering yourself in that, reciprocally in a very limited way. And what you want to do is kind of open up the aperture. Again, you're not leading with something which isn't definitely you, but leaning into the parts of yourself which you're afraid to show, afraid to share, because that's where the kind of richness, that's where the dynamic element of a friendship can really help you evolve as an individual, not just the friendship, but what can it do for you? And so these things are all kind of magical opportunities for self-exploration. And so understanding the roles, understanding like, are you the nurturer? Are you the fun friend? Are you the fixer? Are you the whatever? And then opening up the aperture and saying, okay, that's great. That's who I am. That's how I show up. How can I show up differently? How can I and play around with it? Like, there's a lot of gold there.
I liked reading about the different kinds of friends. And also, I'm pretty sure I read something here about, sometimes we'll think that each one of our friends is supposed to be like the wheel of all of these things.
Everything. Yeah.
And they're not going to be.
That's right. And then getting information about like what that person is bringing to the relationship for you is so important, because we do think like, you're a friend, so you should fulfill all my needs. And that's just not true. Not everybody, alchemically, they're not going to resonate with you on all things, right? And so we get so disappointed and bummed out when somebody isn't there for us in a way that maybe they're not capable, and that's okay. What are they capable of? Lean into that, because that's the richness in the dynamic between the two of you. And to that point, do you know the psychotherapist Esther Perel? Okay, so she is like, you got to follow her. She's amazing. She's got an amazing podcast. She specializes in couples therapy, and she's got an amazing podcast called Where Should We Begin? And she sees couples on this podcast. Anyways, she's brilliant. But she has been talking about like, well, at least I've tuned into her talking about this for like maybe the last 6 months, a year, talking about the importance of friendship, because these days romantic partners have become everything.
Yes. No, Kevin's everything.
They're the business partner. We're not just talking about yoga. We're doing it together. We're like raising the kids. We're making the lunches. I know everything about every single one of my husband's coworkers. He knows everything about. This takes all of the magic, all of the mystery out, and think of the weight that has, right? And if you look at relationships, and I'm not saying this was a perfect world, but if you looked in like, the 50s or 60s, the man went to work, the woman stayed at home. And I'm not saying that is not what I'm advocating for at all. But when you look at it from relationally, that guy went out and did his thing. The woman did her thing. When they came back together, they weren't talking about what happened all day long. They were like, let's have a martini and, talk about social plans or have friends over and we'll have, a dinner and we'll sit around the table and talk and stuff. And so the dynamic of a romantic relationship is so changed now. And especially 2 years in a pandemic where on top of everything, now you're working from home together. This is bananas. And so the importance of finding friends and saying, this is what this friend can fulfill for me and I for her. This is what this friend, so that it takes just at the very least something off of the romantic relationship. So like it can breathe and do its thing and like the magic that it's supposed to, as opposed to like, I know every single thing about every single thing that you do all day long. And like in a soulmate sense, that's amazing. But in a practical sense, one should be a little careful to like just outsource a bit. And you have this resource here in friends, if you're doing it right, to do that.
I agree. It's so funny. Throughout the course of this whole interview, I'm thinking, oh my God, I don't think I reach out to friends when I'm sad. Like any of these moments when I've been like in the fetal position crying about my mom or whatever, it's Kevin who like will run in the room and then we'll get through it and then I'm done.
Yeah.
Because I also don't like to burden people with everything. Right. And I think
it's not a burden. Friendship, it's actually like an honor.
Yeah.
If the person's real and the relationship's real, it's like an honor. And I actually talk about, I had a really good interview. So as you know, in the book, it's me talking most of it, but I chose 10 vignettes. I interviewed 10 women about their friendship stories. And I interviewed this journalist, an LA Times journalist, Lindsay Sharp, whose daughter was born with a very rare and terminal disease. And so she went through hell.
The mitochondria thing.
Yes. So she continues to, it's her absolute joy, but it's also, I can't even imagine. Right. And she talks about being kind of scared to like burden the friendship, and then the revelation of like it's the highest pinnacle of respect for the relationship if you're really going something through, and or like the death of your mom, these are real things that define you as a person, and you want to be able to not just share but be supported. And people, I think, really, if they're invested in the friendship, these are like moments of great honor. That they could provide any sort of a listening ear or a shoulder to cry on, or any kind of meaningful, shared life advice if they've gone through something. So it's a real opportunity.
There was someone else in the book, was the last name Tong?
Sasha Tong, yeah.
Tong, where she talked about how she's like the superhero cape girl.
Right.
And then people weren't there for her in return.
Right. She went through this crazy thing.
Explain that, because I thought, I connected with that because I had to realize that I'm really good at putting my superhero cape on. Kevin and I both are.
Right.
But then when people don't do that for you, you're like confused.
You're like, what happened?
And it took me a minute to realize that that's just our superpower. We're really good in crisis. Other people aren't.
Right, exactly. And so Sasha Tong, she is a co-host for a really popular podcast out of Canada. And she does it with her friend, and the two of them have a really tight group of friends, and her role within that group is kind of like the superhero, kind of like ultimate fixer, like when something's going wrong. So that she was that for that group. She is that for that group of friends. And then, and this is a really long-standing group of friends. And a couple of years ago, she woke up one morning and had no vision. She literally was blind. And she went to the doctor, she's taken to the doctor, and they were like, we don't know what has happened here, and we don't think there might not be a way out of this. We just can't, she went then test and test and test and test. And so for like a year, she couldn't see anything. You can imagine what a horror this is, right? And luckily, she was able to come out of it. And when she came out of it, she realized like none of her friends showed up for her in a way that she is constantly showing up for them. And so she was so bummed out and so upset and so depressed and just really like less than angry. She was like kind of devastated, right? And then she brought it up to one of her friends, and her friend was shocked, and she was like, I'm so sorry. You didn't ask for help. I guess I should have known, but, and so Sasha was like, I was still really angry and like, how could you not have known, or really upset? Like, how could you not have known? But also, that's right. I show up this way. I never once showed vulnerability. I never came to a cry for help, like had a breakdown with one of them. They really, I think, thought just because of the history of the way I've been able to keep it together, hearing their own stories, that I was managing.
Yep.
And I wasn't managing. I was scared shitless and literally blind.
Unreal.
You know, imagine how that, you know, shapes your world like overnight. And so like, yeah, it is important to understand like how you show up. It's also important to communicate. Like when people aren't like showing up for you, yes, they could be just being really shitty, or maybe they've just like, maybe they need to hear it and will automatically jump in and be like, my God, you know, thank you for telling me. And here I am.
That's the thing. I think that it's easy to have expectations.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the worst thing we can do. But the truth is sometimes people don't know. Everyone's so busy. Yeah. And everyone's so in their life and in the chaos of their own life, because everyone has their own chaos.
Right.
And so it's hard to think that someone can just read minds and be there, which, by the way, I've expected people to read minds sometimes.
Right.
And I'm looking back and I'm like, shit, I shouldn't have done that, because, you know, yes, it would look very obvious that I was suffering.
Right.
I'm suffering. I don't know. Be nice if you said, hey, let me take you out for a drink and relieve you of your pain.
Right.
Didn't happen. But although me and Alyssa did go, we got wasted. It was really nice. But I think that, you know, it's if we can just remember that everyone's so overwhelmed in their own shit.
Right.
Exactly. That you do have to be more clear.
Right.
It just sucks when you feel like you have to say something.
Right.
It's really hard.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, it doesn't feel good that you have to say something.
And how do you say it?
Yeah.
How do you say, hey guys, I'm really suffering right now. Like, will you take me out?
Yeah. Well, I mean,
which is sad, because when you hear, so this is what bothered me when I'd hear of like people. This is what made me want to move to Nashville. My friend was visiting me. My parents both had COVID. They were just released to me, and I'm now their nurse, and it was a friggin' shit show. And she said, you know, my friend, she was pregnant. She just had a baby, and like all the friends there put together this Meal on Wheels program to help her. And I'm like, Meal on Wheels? Yeah. She had a great thing happen. I'm dying here. Yeah. But people just assume she has money. She's good. Right. And it's like, it wasn't even about the money. Right. My head was falling off my own body. Right. I couldn't, if I tried, figured out how to order food. Right. Anyway, if Kelsey wasn't here, I would have literally just died. Right. And it was because she was physically here. She got to see the physical needs. You might not have known if you weren't physically here either. Right. But you know, you're just kind of shocked.
Where is everybody?
Yeah. Or when they're like, oh, if we were there, we'd be able to help. And I'm like, you can't just throw a couple cookies in a box and ship them to me. I know you're making Christmas cookies. Just the thought, just to make me feel like I'm supported.
Totally.
But people can't get out of their own way. Everyone's so busy doing their own thing. So you have to I say all of that just to paint the picture so you know, like, I've equally been disappointed, and now I'm realizing I can't expect that of anybody unless you have the courage to just say, I need help.
Yeah. And it is too bad that you can't just expect this from people, but we've got a lot of retraining to do until we get back to that place. You know, because in a perfect world, I think you should be able to expect, you know, that like when some major life event happens,
it's major, it's obvious, guys.
It's obvious, right? Yeah. And then so you need to look at is this just really bad behavior, or is it like a life chaos situation? And the truth is 9 times out of 10, it is a life chaos, situation. That to me is still not a good enough excuse. And that's why you got to find your hot shower and reduce the chaos every single day. What am I doing to reduce the chaos in my mind so I can not just show up for other people, but show up for myself? Because if you're not showing up for other people, you know, a lot of times you're not showing up for yourself. Yeah. And obviously that's a massive problem.
Yeah. I could talk about this forever, but I'm just going to give you guys a quick highlight before we end the show. There's the nostalgic friend. Whew, don't we all have those? The nurturing friend, the creative friend. Mm-hmm. Honey, I hope you're listening to this. Kevin's really starting to lean into the people that will foster his creativity and encourage his creativity. Mm-hmm. The mentor friend, the friend like you, which, we all like to be with people that are like us. That's why we all dress the same. I was glad that you put that in there because I laugh about that. The friend who's not like you, I think is so important. The vital friend, your ride or die, and then toxic friends. Ooh, couple exclamation points on that page. And so I think you could do yourself no better service than to get this book, guys, and read it and start dissecting your friendships and you yourself.
Yeah.
And how you're showing up for your friends, right? Like I have to be really mindful when I'm talking to Alyssa because my life is like so full of like all this like vastly different things that she's exposed to, right?
Right.
She works at the airlines. Her life is like kind of the same thing every day, right? Mine, I have like all these new things that are popping in all the time. I have to be so careful not to dominate conversations and to make sure I'm asking about her life and her family and everything like that. But that's like me being very intentional to not get caught up. And I know that there were probably times I did get caught up, but I was like, okay, I got to really be intentional here.
Exactly.
So
those things matter.
Auditing yourself and everyone around you is really important. And as we said, very important to your health. So on that note, Heal Squad, we love you. If you haven't hit subscribe, hit it now so you don't miss a great interview. And don't forget to leave a comment on Apple Podcasts. Kelsey will put a link to that in the summary of this episode. Again, the book is called How to Break Up with Your Friends, Find Meaning, Connection, and Boundaries in Modern Friendships by Erin Falconer. Great cover, by the way.
Thank you.
And I love all the colors. In the meantime, be nice people, make good choices, and be present.
This podcast and all related content published or distributed by or on behalf of Maria Menounos or mariamenounos.com is for informational purposes only and may include information that is general in nature and that is not specific to you. Any information or opinions expressed or contained herein are not intended to serve as or replace medical advice, nor to diagnose, prescribe, or treat any disease, condition, illness, or injury, and you should consult the healthcare professional of your choice regarding all matters concerning your health, including before beginning any exercise, weight loss, or healthcare program. If you have or suspect you may have a healthcare emergency, please contact a qualified healthcare professional for treatment. Any information or opinions provided by a guest expert or host featured within website or on company's podcast are their own, not those of Maria Menounos or the company. Accordingly, Maria Menounos and the company cannot be responsible for any results or consequences or actions you may take based on information or opinions.